You know, I said to a reporter the other day, we were talking about the protests at the Capitol, and I said, they made a mistake with Scott Walker. They got into a stare down with Scott Walker. He hasn't blinked yet. You know, when a governor leaves office and retires, they usually leave like a nice little note saying how much they enjoyed the job. Hope you like it too. Jim Doyle and the Democrats left a $3.6 billion hole. That's the legacy of that administration and the Democratic Party, which meets in their convention in 2 weeks. A little change, they're staying at a Wisconsin hotel this time. You know, when things are good, it's easy to lead. When the money's coming in, people are in a good mood, polling's good, it's easy to lead then. But when things are tough, when you inherit the mess that Scott Walker inherited from the Democrats and Jim Doyle, that's when the leaders stand up. That's when the real leaders stand up. The people who come forth and say, I know the way. I'll get us out of this. And so it was that Milwaukee County Executive Scott Walker stepped up. The focus of the nation is not on Wisconsin or the state capitol because we have these protesters in the Capitol. The focus of the nation is on Wisconsin because Scott Walker is doing the right thing. And some people don't like it. It would be easier for him to kick that proverbial can down the road. But the can has gotten too big. And the road has gotten too short. And so that's not a choice. We reward action in the Republican Party, and the time for action is now. And this governor has taken the actions that he needed to do to save this state from the mess that he inherited, and he's not done yet. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of Wisconsin, Scott Walker.
Kids I'd ever seen in this front yard.
Thank you. Good. We love you too.
Good morning. First off, I should acknowledge probably the most important person in the state, at least the most important person in my life, the First Lady of the great state of Wisconsin, Tonette Walker, is here. My boys, Matt and Alex, are not boys, my young men, my two sons were with me last night. They heard me speak last night. I think they're going down a slide about right now. So they're doing what's good to do in the Dells, and we're glad to be here. What a great crowd. It's hard to believe it's an off year, because it's not an off year, as Ron just mentioned. You know, on November 2nd, which just happened to be my birthday, we declared all across Wisconsin that Wisconsin is open for business. On January 3rd, we started proving it. You see, we didn't wait a year or 6 months or even a month. We started acting on it right away. Because when I interviewed to be your governor last year and for the 18 months leading up to the election, I told people we faced an economic and a fiscal crisis, and I told people what I'd do to turn that around. And I said we couldn't wait a year or 6 months or even a month. We had to start acting on it right away. So on January 3rd, we started proving that Wisconsin was open for business. And I got to tell you, I went back after taking the oath of office and giving the inaugural address, and I handed to the new speaker, the new majority leader, a call for a special session. I asked them to act on the first 30 to 45 days. They took that challenge. They exceeded that. And in every way, the men and women of the majority in the Assembly and the Senate deserve our praise and our credit because they've lived up to that challenge. For all of them here, and I see a bunch up, please stand up and be acknowledged because they're the leaders in this fight. I mean, think about it. I talked to a reporter back early in February before all this other stuff happened from the Associated Press. He was doing a national story. And he said, you know, most governors haven't even found their office. Most lawmakers couldn't even tell you where the bathroom is in the Capitol, and yet you have passed the most aggressive pro-jobs agenda in the entire country. We reduced the tax burden for job creators. We cut through the red tape when it comes to regulation. We passed major tort reform to lower the cost of frivolous lawsuits. We made it easier to access for workers and farmers and small business owners, health savings accounts. We even transformed the Department of Commerce into a new public-private partnership, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. We did that with Republicans, with one independent, and a handful of discerning Democrats. Imagine what we can do because we're just getting started. And you know, it's working. It's working. We're 5 months in. We just released this week new job numbers. In the first 5 months of this year, the private sector, because of our actions, have created more than 25,000 new jobs in the state. 11,500 of those are in manufacturing. How about that for outcomes? Two weeks ago, Chief Executive Magazine put out its annual report about a survey they do of CEOs from across the country. Now, in Wisconsin, we don't normally talk much about that because usually we're ranked somewhere between 40 and 50. Last year, we ranked 41. This year, 2 weeks ago, when the survey came out, we went from 41 to 24, 17 states advanced, the fastest growth of any state in the country, and the fastest increase of any state in the history of the CEO survey. The Wall Street Journal talked about an editorial some of you may have saw this past Monday, and they talked about us going up and how amazing that was and how ironic it was that for all the attention to the protests and the signs and the anger, what it said to CEOs and job creators here and across the country was, you have a government that's willing to stand with you to create jobs in the state, no matter what protest, no matter what outrage. You know, the people who stood around the Capitol have every right to be heard. They really do. That's what's great about America. But 50 or 60,000 people don't get to drown out the voices of 5.5 million taxpayers who want us to get this state working again. Now, not only are we creating a better business environment to create more jobs in the private sector in this state, we're also tackling the fiscal challenges that we inherited. You know, Brian talked about that. 2 years ago, Jim Doyle and the Democrats in charge of the legislature passed a budget with the largest structural deficit in state history. We inherited a $3.6 billion budget deficit because of that. And years before that, they raided the Transportation Fund and the Patient Compensation Fund. The last budget, they took billions of dollars of federal stimulus money, money that supposedly was for one-time purposes, for infrastructure and things like that. They used it to plug their budget holes. So today we face a major budget deficit. Now think about that. That'd be like a couple years ago when the economy started to melt down. If you all ran out and you got a credit card and you put $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 worth of debt on there and then you said, here, and you gave it to your kids. Right? Who would do that? Who would do that? But that's exactly what government has done. It is time to cut up the credit cards and pay the bills and start thinking about the next generation and not just the next election. And we're doing the right thing there. Think about it. We've balanced the budget. Our budget is balanced. We balanced $3.6 billion deficit without an increase in taxes. In fact, you'll be happy come this December because for the next 2 years, we truly freeze your property taxes so that small business owners and family farmers and individuals can live in their homes and their businesses. We do all that. We virtually eliminate the structural deficit. In fact, I went out a couple of weeks ago to the national bond rating agencies in New York. We talked about what we were doing. All three of them affirmed our bond rating, even while other states were dropped. And Moody's, one of those national bond rating agencies, said that our budget, when passed, is credit positive. When's the last time you heard anything in government called credit positive? We're leading the way, and it's going to make it easier to create jobs in this state because investors look at that. Now, on top of creating a better business environment and making a long-term commitment to balance our budget, really, a commitment to the future, so that our children and our grandchildren don't face more dire consequences than what we face today. The third big thing we've done and will continue to do is make our government work better. Now think about it. I'll give you a good example of this. A year ago, there was a woman by the name of Megan Sampson who was a teacher at the time. She got an award from the Statewide Association of English Teachers as being the Outstanding New Teacher of the Year. A week later, she got a layoff notice. Why is that? Because her collective bargaining agreement and her union contract mandates that the last in is the first out. So no matter how great she is, no matter how wonderful that teacher is, her contract says seniority and union contracts trump merit and performance. Well, because of our reforms, our schools can now put our best and the brightest in the classroom and pay them for their performance, not just for seniority. That's about being pro-education, pro-teacher, and pro-children. We're standing up for the children and not just for the contracts. Now, thank goodness that great teacher actually ended up with a job after she got laid off of there at Wauwatosa East High School, which was where my two sons are proudly members of the public school system because they get a great education there. And I want to make sure that great teachers like her and others across the state are rewarded with a system based on merit and performance, and that's exactly what they're going to get. Now, we don't have to guess how that's going to work out because we've seen it in other states. You see, 6 years ago, my friend Mitch Daniels in Indiana did something similar for state employees. 6 years ago, Mitch did it through an executive order. Now, believe me, I looked everywhere possible to figure out a way to do that through an executive order. In Wisconsin, you got to do it through the statutes. But if you look at what he did in Indiana, the second weekend, he signed an executive order that made those reforms. Today, that government is more efficient, it's more effective, it's more accountable. The median household income in that state has gone up. It's more accountable to the taxpayers. And you know what else? Great state employees are rewarded for their excellence and their performance. That's exactly what's going to happen here in the state of Wisconsin. Now, we're on a roll here in Wisconsin. We've created a better business environment that's going to help us put people back to work again. We made decisions that are about balancing the budget not only for today and for the next 2 years, but for the next generation. You know, ultimately thinking about our kids and our grandkids as much as we're thinking about ourselves today. Those are fundamental changes, and now we're doing things that not only balance the budget, they make the government work better for the people we're elected to serve. We're on a roll. But the only way that roll stops is if things change later this summer. Now, a lot of people are excited about the United States Senate. We see the benefit of sending someone like Ron Johnson to the United States Senate. And next year at this time, I hope we're equally, if not more, charged up about our potential to elect a Republican to fill that other seat in the United States Senate. But I don't want to blunt that enthusiasm, but I'm going to speak candidly to you. For the next 2 months, you shouldn't think about any United States Senate seat. You should think about protecting 6 brave state senators and trying to pick up 3 more in the state Senate, because that's where our focus has got to be. You see, our lawmakers literally did not only take a courageous political vote, they took a courageous physical vote. They were intimidated, they were attacked, they were abused, their families got abused, you can only imagine, in some third world country. And yet they stood up, and instead of being melted down or pulled back or somehow wavering, it made them stronger. It made them more decisive. It made them more focused about what was important, and together, we not only got that measure passed and we're going to see it fulfilled, we're not only going to turn the state around and balance the budget and put more people back to work again and see a better government in this state, we're ultimately going to prevail on July 12th. And again later for some of those races come the middle of August, if there's a primary, we're going to prevail because we have to. It's not if, it's when we prevail, because I am convinced this isn't just about the majority in the state Senate. This isn't just about where the legislature is headed in the state of Wisconsin. This is ultimately about courage. When we had men and women in the state assembly and the state Senate who could have easily backed away from a vote like this, particularly as the crowds grew bigger and bigger and bigger. When in Madison, and I remember my friend Governor Dreyfus once said that Madison was 30 square miles surrounded by reality. I thought that a lot over the last couple months. But when, for those in the Capitol, it looked pretty glim. When it would have been easier to back off, instead, those lawmakers stood up and did the right thing. The right thing not just for this party, but for this state, and ultimately for this country, and took a courageous vote. It is an imperative that we do, not just in the areas around those Senate districts, for everyone in this room, and everyone else you represent across the state, not just in the Republican Party, but for everyone who cares about the future of our state and our country and our freedoms, for you to stand up and do everything in your power to make sure we re-elect these 6 brave state senators and have a shot at picking up at least 1 or 2, if not all 3 of those, not open, but those Senate Democrat seats that are faced in the recall. That's what this is all about. If you don't think the stakes are high, look at this morning's paper. There was yet another story about the head of the AFL-CIO nationally talking about how they're pulling back from congressional Democrats. And you know where they're putting their money? They're putting their money in Wisconsin and Ohio. The big government labor union bosses from D.C. have decided it's more important to bear down and hunker down in Wisconsin and in November in Ohio than it is in Washington, D.C. That should tell you how high the stakes are here. And they don't care. It's not about the working people. We are the ones who stand with the middle class in the state. We stand for middle class taxpayers and middle class workers. You see, for years, the middle class has been stuck picking up the bill of the expansive government. It is time the middle class stand up and say, no, we want our government back. We're not going to have it stolen. We're going to stand with the people and not let the protesters try and block out our courage. We stand with the middle class. We protect middle-class jobs and middle-class taxpayers. That's why I'm asking for your help. We can trump the millions, probably $20 to $25 million. The national big government labor union bosses are going to jump into this state in the next couple months. We can trump that with the grassroots. We did it last November. We're not going to let their big money come in from other states and counter the interests of the taxpayers of the middle class of the state of Wisconsin. And I'll tell you why, because in the end, not if, but when we triumph, it will send a powerful message not only in Madison, in our state's capital, but in state houses across this country and in the halls of Congress where God knows we need more courage. What has made America great for more than 200 years is that in times of crisis, men and women of courage have stood up all throughout our nation's history and said that they care more about their children, and their children's children than they do about themselves. This is one of those times. This is when we need to stand up united with the middle class all across the state and all across this country to say we will stand with those who are brave enough to do what is right and just, and when we prevail, it will be good for Wisconsin and for America. Thank you for helping to make that possible.